This is Code Green, weekdays from 8 a.m. on Spirit TV.
Welcome back from that short break. Super delighted that you're still watching us here on Code Green. Now, the next session, of course, is, allow me to call it civic education. Unfortunately, while it is civic education, it is your money that you give every single day that we're going to be discussing, and that's the national budget. Ladies and gentlemen, to better have that discussion, I am joined by a financial analyst, an expert, that is none other than Juliet Aquillo, who works with CS Bank. She will be telling us some brief information about that, and what an honor it is to have her because she has selflessly decided to come and explain to us in simple terms. When people hear budget, financial talks, they think we're going to mention percentages and figures, but in the conversation that I had with her, she makes it sound so easy. And when I asked her what we can do, she also broke it down. And I felt like, you know what, it's important we have this discussion with the masses that are responsible for this budget. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can, let's humbly together welcome Miss Aquillo. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
It's great to have you on this set.
Thank
Finally.
you. Thank you.
We were meant to have this conversation earlier on, but you know, we're glad that it's been sorted and that we are here with you. Maybe before we even hit the budget issues, who is Aquillo and what is CS Bank?
Yes, Godwin, thank you very much for inviting me.
You're
and
welcome.
Having me here. Juliet Aquillo is an economist. I just wish to correct that.
Oh, economist, yes.
I'm an economist, and I work with the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. The Budget Advocacy Group basically looks out for prudent financial management. And of course, much of our work is mainly geared towards analyzing the budget, the national budget, the district budgets, anything budget, anything financing is exactly what we usually look out for. But then also we rally citizens to be able to participate in the budget process, so that their issues, their concerns are actually incorporated into the budget process.
Oh, that's so. Are you a government entity or is it private? I don't know. Help us understand.
No, CS Bank is a CSO, just like any other CSO. But like any other CSO does, we give government alternatives. We analyze government documents, but then also give them alternatives. It is as simple as that.
Okay, that's amazing. Maybe, you know, the process of budgeting, it has, I mean, for every stage that we reach, there are different activities. I do not know what stage we're at right now. What exactly is happening? I see you've come here to educate us. At what stage are we at this before they read the final budget?
Now, interestingly, the stage at which we are at is the final stage of the budget process. The budget process begins when the budget is read. Okay. Then, just like we are going to see the reading on the 14th of May, after that reading, after June, the planning and budgeting process begins. Immediately. For the next one? For the next financial year.
Yes. Oh, amazing.
2023-2024 is going to start. And so, of course, throughout the financial year, this financial year that is going to run, budgeting is taking place for the next financial year. And through those, throughout the year, citizens are able to participate. There are avenues where citizens can participate. But you realize that many times citizens don't know those avenues, and so they sit back and just wait for the reading of the budget.
I mean, it's not any different for us in the media as well. We only wait to, when a certain figure is announced, we're like, this one is too high, this one is too low. But mention, what are some of those activities that happen during that season? You talked about in our discussion, the donation and those many activities that to bring awareness closer to the people.
Now, just to maybe start from when the budget begins.
Yes.
When the budget process starts in July, because in July they are planning, okay? They are planning especially at the district level. But around September, by August actually, the main process has started.
Yes.
It starts with consultations of citizens, and then of course Ministry of Finance then goes ahead to hold consultations with district local governments. Now usually citizens are actually given chance to participate.
Really?
Yes, in that case a number of issues that maybe citizens saw that were not incorporated in the previous budget, usually citizens can always present it again.
Okay.
So in those local government consultative workshops, citizens are able to present, and of course government picks them up. But then of course there are those that maybe government would drop because the resource envelope might not be accommodative enough for all those priorities of citizens. But then after that, there is usually, actually before that, there is usually the national conference, budget conference, where citizens can also provide their priorities,
yes,
or their insights of what they want government to take on. Then of course the local government budget consultations come on board. After that, still at the district level, you find that districts, sub-counties are actually having district budget conferences, then sub-county budget conferences.
Yes.
So when it comes to planning and budgeting, it actually starts from the ground. And so citizens have opportunity to participate.
Even when you say that, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I have had those being advertised so that citizens can go there, because they are quite resourceful citizens who would like to speak into the process. Could it be an issue of awareness or advertising, an issue of I don't know, it doesn't seem to be trickling down. I hear you saying it, but I've not seen it or heard of it.
It is an issue of awareness, and that mainly falls in the hands of the Ministry of Finance. But of course, just like civil society organizations like us who work with the communities down, we usually give them this kind of information. The only challenge is we cannot be everywhere. So usually we provide information for those that we can reach. And in places where we work, our citizens that are there have participated in these budget processes. Just to continue from where I left it,
yes,
usually by December, you find that the Ministry of Finance has put together all these discussions from the district level,
yes,
and they consolidate it into the national budget framework paper. Now, that framework paper is one of those outputs that helps discussion. It's just to provide guidance and to tell the public what government actually intends to do in the next financial year. And so you find that in January, Parliament is looking at, you know, these the ideas,
the proposals.
The proposals in the budget framework papers. Of course, when Parliament has had its has had its position on it, then ministries actually submit ministerial policy statements. At that point, there's also discussion, but even at the national, at the NBFP level, that is the National Budget Framework Paper level, citizens can provide their input into the budget. And that is when you will hear citizens going to Parliament. Now, when they go to Parliament, they discuss with different committees, depending on what kind of position paper that you have presented. Now, at CSBAG, we usually have different papers that we write, of course, based on the interest that citizens want.
And talking about interest, because that's an area that I want us to start from, probably the overarching figure. What's our budget like this coming financial year? I mean, we only hear trillions. Have they finally come up with a figure?
Oh yes, in May, Parliament pronounced itself with all these discussions that have been going on, like I said, from September until now. Finally, Parliament has come up with a position. There is a report that was shared in Parliament, I think in the 20th of May, and this gives you a precursor, a sneak peek of what the main national budget is going to be.
Okay.
And of course, when you talk about figures, I remember at the NBFP level, we were talking about 44 trillion.
44 trillion.
Then it changed to about 47 trillion, but that was not yet conclusive.
Yes.
But as of now, the budget is going to be about 48 trillion.
48.8, I think.
Yes, 48.18, based on the Parliament report. So that is what we expect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at that. Of course, of the 48.18 trillion. Could you help us break it down in terms of is that entire money available for us to use? I see you smiling, and are you feeling sorry for us as Ugandans?
No, not really. Not really.
Or should we be worried?
No.
What does it mean? Because
citizens really need to understand that a budget is made up of wishes.
Okay.
Maybe just to bring it down to a home care budget, because I wouldn't wish to consider that big budget and not relate it to what someone has at home.
Yes.
Now, if you look at a family budget, you have children to take to school, you have medical care to take care of, you have
rent if you rent,
you have those utilities
food
that
and other
food and everything. And of course, you are looking at a period of 1 month. You can draw your budget.
Yes.
Then you say this will go for school fees, this will go for uniforms, this will go for shoes for children, this will go for, you just put aside miscellaneous for medical care and all that. But even before you draw that budget, you will have your list of the things that you need.
Yes.
When you draw that list, you have a specific amount of money. So you start allocating how much money you think you are going to actually spend on those items. At a certain point, you realize that the money is not going to be enough. And yet you need all these things. Now, what happens is sometimes you begin realizing that, you begin rationalizing. I think this is not important. Let me remove it. I think
let me postpone it.
Let me postpone like that. So that is exactly what happens. Now, when you realize that everything on your budget, on your priority list is actually a requirement, you may think of other ways of funding it. And part of the ways of funding it is through borrowing. You may go to a neighbor, you may go to a relative, and so our budget is also like that.
So that's not how, unfortunately, that's not how it's presented to us. Those are some of, the expected digits that have come out. Unfortunately, you see, when Ugandans are being told, you see, when you promise me at a campaign level, I expect that when you're budgeting, you're going to fulfill the things. So you're sharing with me the dream, and then here you're sharing with me how you expect to finance that dream. Unfortunately, I see as if sometimes a lot is shared in the manifestos, but the budget and what is shared are going in the opposite direction. That's a story of another day. But so let's go back to the national budget. So of which how much is available of the 48.18 trillion Uganda shillings?
Now, the budget, I would say, is divided into recurrent expenditures and development expenditures.
Okay.
Just like I said, a family budget. There are those things that you have to keep paying for. Electricity, water, those ones are recurrent expenditures, just like in government. Same similar thing. And we know that government actually employs public servants.
True.
And those ones are supposed to be paid. Now, those are a must, they have to be covered. Now, of the 48 trillion that we have, our recurrent expenditure is very likely to take about 71%.
71%?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is the bigger portion.
That's about
and so That's about
30 something.
About 34 trillion shillings,
okay.
Yes. And so whatever is left, the other amount, I think about 14 trillion, is what is left for development, is what is left for a family to actually maybe buy land, for a family to build a house. That is exactly what it is.
You make it sound like it's so great, and which I'm very happy. But with the amount of borrowing that we have and what we've had, and the pockets of the ones who we owe, and the hands of the ones we owe money in our pockets before we even concentrate on salaries, how much of the budget is being used to pay to service our debts?
Now, just to clarify on the 14 trillion that I'm talking about, I said that is for development.
Yes.
Now, that amount of money, the recurrent and then the development money budget that we have, that is from our domestic revenue.
Okay.
Okay. And our domestic revenue is very likely to be about 25 trillion shillings.
Okay.
And so of that 25 trillion shillings, that is where the development, the development funds and then the recurrent expenditure is going to be accommodated.
That's the 14 trillion.
No.
Oh, sorry.
The 25 trillion that URA is going to collect is what is assumed to cater for development expenditure and recurrent expenditure. So you will ask, how are we going to get the other remaining amount of money? 23.18 trillion. Yes, to make about to make up to the 48. That is the bit I was telling you, that in a family, once you realize you need all these things, you will run to a neighbor, you will run to a relative. And so part of that is going to come as a result of our borrowing.
It's a big
Our borrowing is most likely going to go up to about 19.7 trillion. And so, of course, that is much. That is a big burden for us. You realize that previously in the last 2 years, government hasn't been making money. By making money, I mean taxes have been low.
Yes.
The economy was a bit running low, and so there was no much economic activity. And you realize that there was a lot of borrowing within that period for the noble cause anyway.
True.
Because much of the funding went to issues to deal with COVID-19. But there is also a problem. Much as it was required to do that borrowing, there is a problem. Why? Because the funds that was borrowed was not for development.
It was
mainly for consumption.
Yes.
Okay? And so if you are borrowing for consumption, then there is no economic return to it. You are not doing business so that you can earn and then pay back the loan.
We're going to go for a break, but when we return, I would wish for you to address something that is very critical. One of the biggest problems that is happening today is that countries are borrowing for survival as opposed to development. You look at it this way: your parent or you as an individual, you have to borrow money for food, for rent, for the basic things that you'd ideally be able to borrow, and yet even the bank that we're talking about cannot lend you money for food because that's not a reason enough. So is it in order for us as a nation to take that direction after this break?
This is Code Green, weekdays from 8 a.m. on Spirit TV.
The mind might get tired, but learning and teaching never stops. Yes, the mind needs to rest, but you don't have to totally switch off. We've got your afternoon covered. Time is money, and time never stops. Every second, new innovation and skills are evolving, yet they are commendable for you. So, here on the Chit Chat, from Monday to Thursday, 4 p.m., present your business to the world. What do you do? What is your mantra? Can you explain it to others? Well, we are coming to you wherever you are. Inform and educate the public about your work. With me, Simon Masanyu, here on the Chit Chats. Explain and build another.
Spirit TV, a place for you.
Listen to 96.6 Spirit FM online via your mobile app, only for Android devices. Go to your Google Play Store, type Spirit FM 96.6, download and click Listen Live. You can also stream live from our website www.spiritfm.co.ug. Click Listen Now and play 96.6 Spirit FM, music for life.
Say goodbye to ancient stories and embrace a whole new big screen experience.
He forged my signature.
Classic comics, epic action, family-friendly adventures with your favorite heroes and aggressive entertainers.
I'm fine.
You have no gift.
Thanks.
Jesus of Nazareth.
Right here on Spirit TV, a place for you.
This video is an extract from the Dominion Conference with Pastor Dieter Stashobel of Heaven Harvesters Ministry.
Except you take the wisdom that forms and frames by the word, you can't have dominion. But I come to tell you good news, that the realms of the word are open to the immature and the mature. They are very available for the young and the old. They are very available for the small and the big. They are very available for the poor and the rich. They are very available for the educated and the uneducated. They are very available for those that have received a name and those that come from nowhere and nobody knows your village and nobody understands the name of your mother and what she is called. God is telling you that the realms of his word that frames are open for any man.
For prayers or inquiries, call 0703-114-467. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Heaven Harvesters Ministry or visit our website at heavenharvesters.org. Heaven Harvesters Ministry, bringing all men into the kingdom of God.
This is Code Green, weekdays from 8 a.m. on Spirit TV.
Same I have here.
Welcome back from that short break. Indeed, we're still discussing the national budget, and we don't want to bore you with figures. We want to make an overview or an advanced talk so that you can better understand where we're from and why we are here. So before we went for the break, I know I posed the question: is it in order for a government that is filled with highly educated professors of economics and financial experts to run a model which is dangerous for the family and think it is okay for the government?
Now,
highly indebted, year in, year out, we are running a deficit budget. Isn't it a trap for the next generation? Sri Lanka already is paying the price for some of the decisions that we're making here today. Today, the Minister of Finance tells us the economy is whoosh. Tomorrow, he tells us that things are bad. We are highly indebted, upwards of close to 70 trillion Uganda shillings. I'm confused.
Godwin, just to allay your fear, is that borrowing is not a problem.
True.
Because I want to think that even you as a person, you have borrowed money.
But not to this extent.
I mean, we just want to bring it down to, you have borrowed money, you have used it for whatever you have used it, and you have returned it. Okay? If you do that, that is okay.
So use it for the purpose which it was intended, and then return it.
It also depends on what purpose it is. You might intend to borrow for consumption. Okay? But if you are borrowing for consumption, then you should be ready to work an extra mile to actually pay it back, because what you have consumed does not bring back return.
Okay.
Okay. So now, what happens with government borrowing is that government usually borrows for infrastructural development.
True.
Apart from these 2 years where, we saw there was a problem.
Yes.
And indeed they had to borrow. Now, how that money is utilized is what matters.
Okay.
So borrowing per se really has no problem, but the utilization, the management of the funding. Then of course you go to borrow when you're not prepared. Some of those are the challenges we have faced as a country.
We've heard of money staying on accounts and being, for us, even beginning to pay interest before the money is even used. Yes.
Actually, the biggest challenge is we usually go for a loan. We are internally not prepared. So that money, either whichever creditor it is, whether World Bank or whoever, they will earmark that kind of money. They will put it aside. And remember, these are business people. They will put it aside for you. So for as long as you have not picked that money, you are going to pay commission on it, interest on it, commitment fee. You have committed that this money should not leave the basket. So for as long as you are not ready, you have to continue paying commitment.
Oh, so what you're saying, ideally, sometimes the money is not with us. It's still with the World Bank or whoever is going to credit us with that money.
You have signed contracts, you have committed, you're going to take it. So you find that lots of money are lying in World Bank accounts, are lying in creditors' accounts, maybe bilaterally, multilaterally. And so for as long as you have stopped them from giving it to the next borrower, you are going to pay commitment fees on it.
Yes.
But it doesn't attract only commitment fees. It will attract interest, because that interest is already calculated on the principal that you're going to borrow. So the commitment fees is a penalty, not even a penalty, a fee for keeping it for you, for saying earmark it. And so since it's not doing business for them, we continue paying that. And so you find that most of our loans, many of them is not disbursed. Like, it is not sent to the Ugandan account to be used. And why? Because we are not yet prepared. So that is where the challenge comes in.
I just wanted to ask, when did we shift to this model of most Ugandans, the model, when you talk about budgeting, I know this is an item and this is money.
Yes.
You understand? Very few of us have gone to the advanced level of this is the overall goal, this is the vision. Let's say I want to let me give you an example. I want to improve myself as a leader, and under leadership I want to do this course, I will do these things, and under the course these are the things that I'm supposed to do. So all activity is geared towards improving you as an individual. Very few of us have broken it down. We just know, I want to do a master's. How much? This money. Where this is taking me, I don't know. Whether it's personal growth or what, I don't know. That's how brief budgets are. But we recently shifted from that mode of budget. That's why every time you say which program, which goal, which developmental goal, some people are wondering, why goal and money, how are they related? It's supposed to be activity. After all, when you're spending it, you don't spend it on a goal. You spend it on road money. So when did we shift, and how has it benefited us in the years compared to what it were before?
To start from where you began, the fact that someone decides to go for a course and they do not know where they're going to end up. Elementary starts from the challenge of career guidance. Okay? And then it ends up in the Ministry of education
Yes.
and the ministry and National Planning Authority working hand in hand. We know there is a National Planning Authority. It plans for the nation. It has to draw development plan for the nation. And right now, we are already running development plan 3. Now, there are 6 development plans to lead to Vision 2040.
Okay.
Okay? And they are segmented into 5-year plans. Right now, we are implementing the development plan 3. And so what the National Development, what the National Planning Authority needs to do, and I hope they really do it, although in the results sometimes you don't see it manifesting. They are supposed to be sitting with Ministry of Education to see that how many engineers are going to maybe do we need. Then of course the Faculty of Technology will then admit that number.
From admission or maybe extend sponsorships.
How many teachers do we need? But that comes as a forecast of several years back, because then in your database, you know, in this year, a number of teachers are going to retire. They are going to retire. So that planning has to come through. Now, whether it is done or not, that is a discussion for another day. But of course, when you see people graduating and they are on the streets and there are no jobs, then you realize there is a problem. However, someone will argue that government, especially government of Uganda, that has said that it is a private sector-led economy. So it has kind of stepped back on creating jobs. So it's like the private sector has to take on the creation of jobs, okay? Which I believe it isn't bad if it is done properly, because then the private sector also has to be given space to be able to blossom, and then there are jobs that are created for these students who are coming out.
You're highlighting many things there, and I'm seeing gaps. I don't know. So
what happens to the programming pattern of budgeting that we have come to? This pattern of programming budgeting came as a result when the National Budget Plan 3 changed to programmatic budgeting. Okay. And that means that all the ministries we have known about, those have remained. They are there, they are working. But they have been consolidated into different programs. Yes. So right now in the Development Plan 3, we have 20 programs. 20 programs. And under each of those programs are a number of previously known ministries or sectors. Actually, these days when you talk sector, people wonder. You are supposed to say sub-program, because there is a program like human capital development, there is education in it, there is health in it, there is water, I think, and sanitation in it. So that's what I'm glad you're saying that, because when you see the budget, you see human capital development, then they put education, health, so many things, and and they're not there as ministries, but as part of the programs, because the same ministries, or as we know them, you will find them in other programs as well. Yes, that's something that's confusing. Now, like the water ministry or anything concerning water, you will find it in human capital development. Why? Because with health and education, you need a bit of water. Yes. You will find it in agro-industrialization, because agriculture, you need water. You will find it also in natural resources, because you need water. Now, that is where there's a bit of a trick. If you want to understand what amount of money Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water has, then you have to look out for all these monies that really speak to Ministry of Water, that speak to Ministry of Agriculture. Anyway, that's and I'm glad you've broken it down. Let's, from your eye, do you think that this budget speaks to the need of Omuntu Awans? In your honest view? Yes. And by that I mean, the most recent trouble that we saw, our health sector was checked by the pandemic. Uganda was fully supported
by the different farmers. That's how we were able to go through the pandemic, because you could access food, amongst other things, and maybe transport, the prices that we're seeing now. Does the budget really address those things?
Now, the citizens usually, the majority of citizens, usually, especially in a country like ours that has a unique population, that you have a certain number, bigger number of them really being poor, then you know that they will depend a lot on public services, because then they cannot afford private services. By so I mean they cannot afford a private clinic, they might not afford a private school. So the budget addresses partially the citizens, the citizens' needs. Why? Because remember I talked about 29% only for development. That amount of money is part of the money that is from URA. Now, if you have only 29% running the development programs of the economy as domestic revenue, because what happens is it is domestic revenue that we are sure about. When you talk about project funding from donors and budget support from donors, you might not mobilize all the money. So you cannot fully bank on them. So I'm speaking basing on what we are sure about. But there is also a challenge that for the last about 2-3 years, there has been a revenue shortfall. So you are not very sure if we shall actually collect the 25 trillion.
Okay.
Now, getting back to your question, whether the budget addresses. Now, the budget, I mean, addressing citizens' needs would require you getting into the health sector budget. Okay, sub-program budget. It will have to require you getting into the education sub-program budget. Now, with education, it's very interesting. For the last 2 years, we know that children have been at home. And then there were those who were growing, okay? And they have gotten into the bracket of being enrolled. Now, you realize that those who have gone back to school talk about P1, P2, P3. Now, there is this lot of P1 which was sent back home when COVID hit. And they went back to P1. Now, there is another cohort, maybe about 2 of them, 2 cohorts of 2020, and those who should have joined.
Yes.
Now, you realize that the cohort of 2019 is in the same class. The cohort of 2020 during COVID is in the same class. Then 2021
to be promoted.
So now they can't be promoted. Why? Because I mean they have not gone through P1. They have to conclude. So what happens is you realize that the infrastructure is overstretched, especially at the primary level. Now, whether that will actually translate into fulfilling the citizens' need is what is to be interrogated, because then we are talking about what kind of quality education is a child going to get in such a large class.
Or what kind of health?
What kind of health is that child going to have even within the class? Because health and education are interlinked.
Yes.
They talk about the human body complete being. Because then you are talking about someone who will grow up and then will become of quality to the nation to an extent that they can be productive enough.
Talk to me about, there was an effort that our government was pushed by donors to be able to merge agencies and ministries and reduce the human capital by maybe 30%. in order to see that maybe our expenditure is reduced. How far has that gone?
Oh yeah, maybe just to conclude on how the budget would actually work on the needs of the citizens. I wanted to talk about agriculture.
Yes.
Now, agriculture, we saw that agriculture was very resilient during the time of COVID. It supported people. It didn't die out. We would talk about that. It never died out. So right now, you look at the budget in terms of priorities of government and how it would actually meet the needs of the citizens.
Agriculture
is, I think, number 5 or number 6 on the priority list, and so you would expect that agriculture could have been a priority, but government has its ways of doing things. But then within the agriculture program, you'll realize that right now there is the PDM coming up, okay? And so citizens can easily benefit in that front. You know, they can make sure they are part of the PDM beneficiaries.
I mean, there are loopholes in there as well.
Yeah, there are loopholes.
And how historically it has shown that most of those models that have come up and have not benefited, especially the target group that we're talking about.
Of course, government will tell you that previously money wasn't going to the parish. I mean, those other loopholes are for another time.
Yes.
But it is okay that
this is the ideal situation.
Yes. But how it is going to be implemented is another thing. We have engaged government on this. We have showed them some of the loopholes, and as we go by, there has been adoption of some of the proposals, and we think that going forward, they will, learn lessons. Of course, there are lessons from previous programs which have failed, and I believe that maybe in this PDM they could address them. Okay. That is something to see.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the merging of institutions. Yes, government is proceeding with the merging.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't know why they haven't given people this kind of
feedback.
Because you realize that the several institutions that cropped up become an expenditure.
Yes.
Okay? The public sector sort of expenditure. And of course it draws a lot of funding. Running them is very expensive. So the rationalization process is ongoing. And I think the last time I knew, about 3 weeks ago, about 68 institutions that were earmarked for merging. I think about 53 of them have actually been placed before cabinet for rationalization, for that whole process to take place. The only thing with it is that people are going to be affected.
Yes.
That is one thing that members, I think, citizens should really know. People will be affected. Why? Because, of course, once these agencies get back to the mother ministries, that means some will have to lose jobs, some will have to get into the main ministry
and have their salaries reduced.
Have their salaries reduced, of course. But then the other thing is government will have to be ready to take care of those they have laid off, because it has a legal implication. But of course, the idea is correct. The idea is good, because then they want to reduce on expenditure. So now this expenditure, once it is reduced, it would free some money for maybe development, for redirection to other projects and all that. The intention is good, but what comes out of
the actual practice is...
The practice, we hope government will live up to its word.
Quick one, as a Ugandan out there is asking, should we expect new taxes?
Largely in the next financial year, most likely there will not be taxes coming up.
New taxes.
New taxes, yes, new taxes. Just to correct that, yeah. Largely, I think there wouldn't be taxes coming up that Ugandans should actually expect. But I think the Uganda Revenue Authority is better placed, and Minister of Finance anyway, is better placed to speak about that.
I know our time is fast spent, but I can't allow you to go without addressing this issue. This nation is known of, or the government or cabinet or whoever, we are known of having supplementary budgets as if we did not plan. For me, it seems that it's a plot, an intentional plot, because the timing is the same, the requests are repetitive in nature, and yet we're running a deficit. So you're asking for a supplementary budget on top of a deficit budget, and yet isn't that a ploy to steal money, really? Or isn't it unethical?
How the supplementary, governments worldwide actually give room for supplementary budgets, okay? the practice of it vary from one government to another.
I mean, to be fair enough.
Yeah, supplementary.
Just a minute, to be fair enough, the budget when it comes to security is already big enough. When it comes to the most recent supplementary budget of about 600 billion Uganda shillings, you realize that most of it, if not 50%, is still going back to security. and these are classified expenditure.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Isn't that you're already having a lot of money that you can't account for? Again, you want more money that you can't account for.
As far as accountability is concerned, the Auditor General actually audits
the classified budget.
Yes, they do. They do. They audit that. Only that it doesn't come out in the public. And so, whatever findings they find, that is up to the Auditor General and the classified team that looks at it. We cannot get into that.
All right.
However, supplementaries are supposed to support unforeseen expenditure or things that you just realize. It's like miscellaneous. You're organizing your wedding function, you're organizing a marriage function, you're organizing a party and all that. There are those things that just come.
So this budget does not have a miscellaneous.
No, listen. So what happens is, giving an example of what COVID did. COVID came at a time we knew 2020 had begun and we were going to move through the financial year up to June and we are fine. And I mean, the financial year started well until about third quarter of 2020, of the financial year 2019-20. So then there was a shutdown and the Ministry of Health was hit. Now Ministry of Health was running its budget as normally planned, but there was an overstretching of expenditure. Okay, now the ministry required supplementary budget. Why? Because much of the budgeted funding in the different sectors were idle. Why would I say that? There were a number of activities like travels abroad that were curtailed, like workshops that were gatherings generally that were curtailed, and so you knew that by end of June these activities wouldn't happen. So they requested for such a supplementary budget. Okay, and of course those monies were gathered from the ministries and given to the Ministry of Health. It doesn't mean I am supporting these kinds of supplementary budgets that come every year, every time within that kind of period.
But they are normal.
The thing is how and where the supplementary funding goes. That is where the issue is.
That's true.
That also points to poor planning for some of the supplementary budgets. Because then if an issue is foreseen, like you needed a road, you don't need a road as something which has just fallen. You always
the road doesn't just come up.
It doesn't just come up. We've always had issues to do with landslides, to do with refugees coming and all that. Sometimes some of those require supplementary budgets. Flooding and I mean, once a supplementary budget comes as a result of that, that is understood.
Ms. Aquillo, unfortunately, you know, our time is fast spent, but what an education. I feel like we should have paid you for this consultancy. It's been pretty extensive, and I hope that you'll be available to come back and we can continue educating the masses on this subject matter. Thank you so much for keeping it code green. I want to encourage you to stick around because we have a lot more programming that is designed for you, from Close to the Altar to the movies, African Exclusive, and many other programming later on during the day. Catch you guys again tomorrow. Have a good one.